All right, welcome back. In this lesson, I'm going to be breaking down how to use the Metascript journaling method specifically for quitting porn. But before we start, quick reminder, okay, this video assumes that you've already watched the Frontline Framework lesson on the Metascript method, okay? Like I'm not going to re-explain the general Metascript technique here, and you need to know it in order for this to make sense, okay? Instead, what I'm going to be telling you about is the two most important kinds of Metascript entries you should be doing daily if you want to get clean. And if you nail these, then in just 5 or so minutes a day, you're going to 10x your ability to quit porn. So let's get into this. If you recall, I've explained that quitting porn is about 80% around improving your life, about creating a life you don't want to escape from in the first place. But then about 20% of it is about specifically removing porn, okay? Now, what you're going to want to do is every single day until you hit 90 days clean, you're going to want to write one Metascript entry for each part, meaning you're going to have one entry for addressing your general life and then one entry for specifically quitting porn, okay? And if you're looking for the single highest leverage tactic in this entire methodology for getting clean, these two entries are it. So let's discuss that general life entry first, because it's basically what we already covered when we outlined the core Metascript method. All you're going to do is run your Metascript scan where you list out the main points of emotional pressure in your life right now. Then you're going to pick the topic with the most energy around it, and then you'll run the 3 questions on that topic with a preemptive, responsive, or retroactive entry. So this might be about work stress, relationship issues, decision paralysis, negative thoughts about yourself, excitement about something you want to do, or anything else that comes up. Generally, you do want to focus on clearing out the big points of negativity first, as those are the most likely to turn into emotional triggers. But you also don't want to be consistently ignoring any positive passions that you've noticed bubbling up inside of you. You see, porn thrives when emotional pressure builds unnoticed. By consistently responding to where your energy is flowing day to day, you'll prevent that energy from building up and then spilling over into porn to cope. By tackling one real life issue per day in your journal, you prevent things from stacking up to a breaking point. Now, you don't need to actually just limit yourself to just one of these entries. Like for me personally, I've made my default habit to do at least 3 of these types of entries per day. And they're usually so quick that it's really not that big of a deal, but at least do one for whatever that biggest, most spiky topic inside your heart is. Okay, so now on to the second entry, which will be specifically about removing porn from your life. And we're going to be getting much more nuanced with this one, but let me start with a quick story to illustrate the power of metascripting for getting clean, okay? Years ago, I was coaching a guy who on paper should have been quitting porn, okay? Like he showed up to every call, he understood all his triggers, he had a solid plan for what to do when cravings hit, and yet, despite both of our best efforts, he kept relapsing, and it was driving both of us crazy, okay? But what was happening was kind of simple, all right? When a craving hit, his mind would just blank. All that knowledge would vanish, and then his old conditioning would take over, and he'd find himself using porn on autopilot. So honestly, out of desperation, I had him do something a little bit differently, okay? Instead of just talking and clarifying how he would respond to cravings, I had him mentally rehearse his response in his journal every single morning. And believe it or not, it worked. He immediately went on to hit 90 days clean once he started rehearsing what he wanted to do every morning in his journal. And that experience made something click for me. Okay, and I realized that overcoming cravings is a lot like shooting foul shots. If you want to hit your foul shots in the 4th quarter when the pressure is on, you don't rely on figuring out your technique in the moment, okay? What do? You shoot a lot of foul shots in practice before the game, okay? And that insight is where preemptive metascripting came from, and the rest of the technique evolved from there and eventually was made even stronger and more efficient when I combined it with the 3 questions. But in essence, metascripting works for quitting porn because it's the most effective way to train your brain in the technique of handling cravings. Once you internalize this pattern, you don't need to keep inventing it in the moment. Your brain already knows what it's got to do, and it just remembers, and it just falls into the rhythm naturally. So with that being said, obviously the main benefit of doing porn-specific Metascript entries is that it's going to allow you to defeat craving. It's going to allow you to program success for future cravings, process present cravings, and turn past slips into positive conditioning events. However, there is also a hidden benefit that is extremely critical for many guys. And what that is that it helps prevent unconscious drift. You see, one of the biggest reasons guys will relapse, particularly after day 40 and before they hit 90, is that they simply forget what they are doing. They get caught up in advancing their life. Maybe they hit a smooth patch where they get very few cravings. And what I found is that this kind of creates a curse of success. And since things are going well, they stop thinking about their big goal of quitting porn. And the problem with this is that prior to hitting 90 days clean, there's still an extremely strong pathway in your brain for porn use. This neural pathway is like a greased chute where in just one moment of forgetting about your goal, you can slide right into relapsing to porn on autopilot. So by cranking out this short porn-focused Metascript entry daily, not only are you going to be, training yourself to overcome cravings, you're also going to be staying connected to the porn-free path, your goal to finally remove this thing, and you're not going to drift from it or forget about it. Now, I will admit the biggest challenge with the porn-focused entry is that it can get a bit repetitive, okay? And frankly, I'll be honest with you, I think that's fine if things get a little bit boring, right? If 3 minutes of boredom daily got you clean from porn, that'd be an insanely good trade. But there are specific ways to combat this because we do not want to just be mindlessly copy and pasting the same entry every day. And we do not want to be doing these entries on autopilot because then they kind of lose their effectiveness. We want them to really hit. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through how to choose between and utilize the preemptive, responsive, and retroactive entry types for quitting porn in a way that'll keep these entries staying fresh, compelling, and powerful. So we'll start with the preemptive entry type because they are arguably the most useful kind for quitting porn. That's exactly what the guy was essentially doing in the, example I told you where I created this whole method, right? And so a preemptive entry should be your default entry if you don't know what else to write about when it comes to quitting porn, okay? And when you do this, all you're going to do is identify where you're most likely to get triggered that day, okay? What that moment will feel like, imagine it, and then how you want to respond. And obviously you'll be doing this using the 3 frontline questions in the preemptive format as you learned in the other video. And basically what you're doing is you're saying, hey, when this moment comes, this is what I know I really want, this is how I can really win, and this is who I truly am. You're going to be able to just simply remember rather than create in the moment. Now to keep these kind of preemptive entries fresh and useful and not insanely boring, okay, you want to make sure that you're actually aligning them with your real life and where you are likely to get triggered that day, because not every day is the same. So maybe one day you think it's most likely that you'll get triggered while watching YouTube in the afternoon. Okay, maybe, it's a weekend and your plans fell through. And then maybe, okay, my triggering spot's this period where I don't have anything, to do. Maybe one day you've got a performance review at work and you're a little bit worried about it. And you might want to relapse afterward if you get some negative feedback. Or maybe that you're going to be interacting with a stressful family member who just always makes you want to escape your life and they bring up a lot of negative stuff. It could really be anything, but the key is that you actually think about the context of your life and what's coming down the pipeline. This self-connection is the key to keeping preemptives feeling compelling and useful rather than just falling into some kind of mechanical autopilot. All right, so let's move on now to responsive entries. And these are the kind of entries that you're going to be wanting to do if you already have cravings and fantasies kind of bouncing around in your head. Meaning you use these if you're sitting down in the journal and you're actually already triggered. And just like with any craving, we're not trying to fight it, we're trying to decode it. All right, so we just use the process we know. We want to identify what kind of craving type you're dealing with, whether it's a chemical craving, emotional craving, a sexual craving, okay? And then we want to run the 3 questions responding to that core desire. And we've already outlined what's the core desire in a chemical craving? It's relief. In an emotional craving, well, it depends on the emotion. For sexual craving, it's, you want to make love, on some level. So we just need to understand what we're dealing with and respond appropriately. And while it's totally possible for cravings to already be present when you sit down at your allotted journaling time, it's not necessarily the most common thing, because usually guys have that like in the early morning when they're doing pretty good, or, you know, in the evening when they're kind of calm and whatnot. So what I found is that guys who tend to get the best results from using responsive entries is when they use them well, you know, responsively, like when a trigger strikes. It's essentially just a more powerful version of doing the 3 questions in your head, as we've talked about, but we're doing it on paper or on, you know, a note app or something like that. So don't shy away from whipping open a note, do these things outside your normal journaling time whenever a craving hits, all right? This is a very useful process. And this brings us now to retroactive entries, all right? And when it comes to porn, you are going to do a retroactive entry whenever you mess up. So if you have a full relapse, then you should always do a retroactive entry and learn from it, okay? Whenever I'm coaching a guy and he relapses, this is always the first thing that I want him to do. Why? Because this exposes what was happening beneath the surface that they were unable to catch or manage in the moment. And usually the critical piece is discovering some unmet desire that they failed to acknowledge, or to reflect on what would have been a more useful path to winning. Not only do retroactive entries like this offer the ability to learn, grow, and make similar relapses less likely in the future, they are also a fantastic way to prevent binging or further relapses before you get back on the horse. Because once you do that retroactive entry and you really think about it and you connect to it, it's like, I'm not going to keep it going. I'm going to get right back to it. However, you do not need to limit retroactive entries to only times where you have a full relapse, okay? It's actually, there's a ton of power in doing these kind of entries on smaller slips as well. Like maybe you scrolled some not quite porn, but still sexual images. Maybe you indulged in sexual fantasy for too long. Maybe you got caught up obsessively ogling some woman in the gym. Whatever. I mean, it could be anything, but you know, like, ooh, this is moving me more toward porn than away from it. A retroactive entry is the perfect counter step to these sorts of behaviors, because chances are you're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. But the problem is that every time a smaller slip occurs, you're taking one step closer to the edge of a full relapse. A retroactive entry is a concrete step away from that edge to get back on track toward your goal of getting clean. So let's boil this all down, all right? In summary, you're going to be doing 2 daily Metascript entries, 1 general life improvement entry, and then 1 specifically for quitting porn, okay? This is very simple, but very powerful. It's taking porn out of the realm of moral struggle and white knuckling and turning it into a conditioning problem that can be solved by simply doing the reps. If you want to avoid sabotaging this formula for success, then you're going to want to keep things rugged, all right? And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, your entries do not need to be super long, okay? You do not need perfect answers. You do not need to feel 100% motivated with everything that you've, written and feel, okay? Also, consistency beats intensity. 5 minutes of this done daily beats an hour of it done once a week, okay? Because at the core, this is just about training yourself to be a man who consistently connects with and honors his true desires, because your true desire is you want to quit porn. And so as long as you can learn how to consistently connect to that desire and all your other true desires, then quitting porn is not going to be hard. It's not going to be you fighting yourself. It's just going to be you doing what you want. So my friends, that's Metascripting for quitting porn. I'm confident you're gonna get incredible results with it, but if you want to best support this process, so you've got a way to organize all your insights and conditioning into a massive progress, then you'll need to move forward with the next lesson. I'll see you there. Booyah.